All right, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight at our webinar. As you all know, this is going to be a panel discussion on really how to think about residency programs as you go through your interviews so that come spring, when you're making your rank list and it's time to make those final decisions, you feel confident and you feel like you set yourself up to thrive wherever you end up. So a couple nuts and bolts, then we'll go through some brief introductions and get started. This is going to be a 1 hour long event. It will be recorded if you want to go back and watch it later. We have a list of questions that I'll be asking our panelists the entire time. There will not be a separate portion for Q&A from you all, but it's really most important to us that we cover any topics that you have top of mind. So with that being said, if you have anything at all you'd like to ask at any point, please do feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand. You can even message me directly and I'm happy to ask anything anonymously as well. So without further ado, my name is Taylor Diederich. I'll be moderating. I'm an intern at the University of Kansas Medical Center Emergency Residency Program. And I'll have each of our 5 wonderful panelists go ahead and give a brief introduction as well, starting with Dr. Natesan.
Hey, I'm Sree Natesan. I'm one of the APDs at Duke University and excited to meet all of you and help with med school, kind of med student advising, and as well as part of the LEM EM Bound newsletter, which helps our kind of medical students give advice for the path to EM. So excited to meet all of you and talk today.
Dr. Sule?
Yep, my name's Harsha Sule. I'm the program director over at Rutgers, New Jersey Medical School in Newark, also the vice chair for academic affairs. I've done the clerkship side of it before as well, so kind of come at it from multiple perspectives there.
Thank you. And Dr. Nordberg?
Hi, I'm Alex Nordberg. I'm one of the APDs at UMass Chan Med School in Worcester, Massachusetts. I was previously one of our EMIG advisors at UMass, and so have also kind of done the student and resident advising portion. Happy to be here.
Dr. Gordon?
Hi, good evening. I am also one of the APDs at Duke University, so I have the pleasure of working with Dr. Natesan, which is a privilege. So great to be here tonight.
And Dr. Pedigo?
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan Pedigo. I'm one of the APDs at Harbor UCLA Medical Center in the South Bay of Los Angeles, and it's great to be here.
All right, well, thank you all. And with that, let's kick it off by kind of a basic question, but I think is really important. And that is, we always throw around this term fit when we talk about residency, but what do we really mean by that? And furthermore, is that really the right thing to be using as a metric when we're deciding where to go?
I don't know who wants to jump in first. I guess I'll unmute. So I do think fit is really important. And, you know, when you're applying to medical school, you don't really know when you're applying and interviewing, like who your classmates are going to be. You might have a class size of like 200, right? The person interviewing you might give you one lecture when you're in MS2 and then you'll never see them again. But like at Harbor, for instance, you know, we have 23 core faculty, and those are the people who you'll be working with for 4 years, right? And, you know, your co-residents, you know, are going to be some of your closest bonds that you make probably in your lifetime, at least it was for me. And instead of, again, a class size of 200, you might have 10 or 12 co-residents. And so it's hard, especially over a Zoom call, to try to figure that out, but hopefully we can kind of get into some of that today. But I do think, you know, feeling like you fit in with a program and that you like the geography, you like the patient population, you like the people, makes or, you know, potentially breaks your residency experience. And so, yeah, I definitely think it's super important, and hopefully we'll get some tips today from others on this panel in terms of kind of feeling that out in a virtual environment.
I'll piggyback off Ryan's answer, and I totally relate that, you know, it could be a frustrating term because it's so maybe vague and elusive. And what is this fit of which you speak? When you tell me, I'll know where to go. But I really do relate to the term. And I think, as Ryan was saying, a lot of it is that connection with people. You might think of fit as kind of related to inclusion, where you just kind of feel this sense of belonging, like you can really see yourself in a place, feel you can express yourself at a place. So as you go through the process, just kind of pay attention to how you feel, and if you feel that sense of connection, because that'll be really important to your ultimate experience, I think, in residency. And then I also saw fit as like when I looked at the senior residents or the near graduate.
I don't know if he frozen on my end
We
or
may,
your end.
yeah.
Dr. Gordon, you're frozen. I'm not sure if you can hear us.
It's important. It's also a significant other or partner. So make sure those broader life needs and goals of family and the needs of your significant others are really important in this equation. So that also has to be included in your fit equation.
Yeah, I think that is something that's hugely important, considering your significant other, family, whatever your social support is going to be in residency. If you already have, someone or a family or close friend, whoever it is, if you already have that person who you think is going to be a significant, shoulders to lean on through residency, right? You're going to go through some like emotionally and physically exhausting times. The area, the city, the area of the country, the geography has to work for them as well. And so that's why, when we look at how students rank what program, geography is always a huge impact. And that's totally fine. Everyone, kind of, not to say expects it, but everyone knows that it's a big consideration. This is a big event in your life, and it has to work for you on every level, not just the hospital.
Well, thank you all for answering. And even just 1 year, even just a few months into intern year, I couldn't agree more that fit, as elusive as it is over a screen, is one of the most important things that you can capture in this process. So let's dig into how you do that in the virtual context in particular. So first off, just generally speaking, what areas in general should you consider when you're trying to even think about capturing that feeling? What things should you be probing on interview day?
Yeah, I think quite a bit of it you might be able to see on the website already, right? To understand like the patient population, the volume, the city itself, right? Searching a little bit about the city and the things to do there as well too, because wellness is important. Because when you go to work, you'll work hard, but when you're off of work, you should probably find a way to kind of decompress and rejuvenate yourself so you're not burned out as well. Because it's hard work that we do, especially I think the pandemic has shown to like what we already know is we've always been there and we will always be there, but we're doing hard work, and residency does not get easier because of the hours and time and the learning curve that's there as well too. So definitely before your interview day, taking a little time to understand the program itself and the faculty, maybe if there's like a niche you have of interest, see if there's faculty members that kind of match with that, can really help you with like the mentorship as you're going through residency to see like how you can connect with the faculty. As well as what the residents are doing as well too. I think that for me was really important, is seeing what the residents are like. Are they happy or not happy? And really, like I think Dr. Gordon mentioned, is like that sense of belonging, because imposter syndrome is so rampant in medicine, and we all suffer from it, and it really hinders the learning if you're always afraid to ask questions when you're in residency. So if you can take that off the equation so that you have an environment where you're ready and excited to learn and make mistakes and grow from them, I think that's the key. And so that's where the belonging comes in. It's like something that, a place that will help you to fight against imposter syndrome as well. And you can find some of that on the website, but also just as you're talking to people, if they make you feel that belonging as well.
Also, I think Zoom is such a difficult place, especially for these social events and things like that, because if you think back to pre-Zoom, so much of it was sitting in that conference room with residents having lunch together, or the pre-interview dinner, or whatever it might be, where you really got a feel for that personality. And you don't get that anymore. But I think, different programs, I think, probably do things differently in terms of how these Zoom interactions are conducted, but you can get a feel by just observing, honestly. It's almost less about you asking questions as opposed to watching those interactions between other residents, watching the juniors and the seniors interact, because even though it's casual and laid back, you can get a sense of, is there a power dynamic? Is there not? Do they really kind of get along with each other? How communicative are they? And then you're not going to see, unfortunately, probably the faculty interacting as much with the residents on Zoom. But with the faculty interviews, it becomes a lot more about, is this someone I could see myself getting feedback from? Is this someone that if they tell me that, hey, I think I need to improve something, is it going to make me really defensive? Is it going to put me in a place that I'm not going to be able to grow and learn? And so those are some of the things you can take away from it as well. That being said, when it comes to all of it about the fit and everything else, I'm a big proponent of what Alexandra said, which is geography. It's geography, location, location, location. That's real, because if you're unhappy in that location, all the rest of the things are not going to matter as much.
That was actually a beautiful segue into one of our next questions, which is at that pre-interview day meetup with the residents. And also during the interview day, I know some programs will have, say, a lunch that's separate just for Q&A with residents. Aside from just trying to see how they interact, which is so meaningful, but can also be limited with a short period of time over Zoom, what questions do you think you could ask to at least start to get the ball rolling, some conversation, some interaction that's going to give you a little bit more of that substantial information?
I think a good place to start is simply asking like where people live in the area. Like for our program in Worcester, it's central Massachusetts. So you can have a 20-minute driving time and have a pretty big circle around the hospital with completely different types of environments that you could live in. And that gives you a sense of, options. And do you see yourself living in that situation, that area of the country, that sort of thing. I would really use the night before the interview and the social hour to ask things that maybe aren't obvious on the website or aren't apparent to you. That's where I think, like asking about like where people live and, like what do you, even just asking the people who are there that night, like, what do you guys do for fun? Like specific examples and that sort of thing. If you're someone who loves rock climbing, for example, we're emergency medicine, so everyone's like rock climbing and mountain biking, right? So ask what's around. Like if you have a day off, is it possible to do whatever your favorite activity is on a one day off rather than needing to go on a vacation, take a week off, that sort of thing. So kind of just like getting the lay of the land, what is outside of the hospital.
I think also like sometimes nonverbal, like we're talking about, actually speaks a lot. So what I like to do is like actually pay attention to the interns, because they just started they just started their medical journey as a doctor, and are they still excited, 3 to 4 months into it? Because they should be, right? They should not be burned out by now, because they're kind of new and fresh into the field itself. And sometimes we don't know what we don't know at that point, which is a beautiful, beautiful thing. But then I also look at the third years, or those who are about to graduate, right? Because the light is at the end of the tunnel now. They can see it. So not to ignore our second years, right, who are kind of like in the midst of it, right? But really looking at the first and third years and say like, are those third years like burned out, right? And those were the things that kind of spoke to me, because if they are, then maybe there's something about that program that isn't supporting them well enough on their journey that they feel that way. Because I still remember meeting a third year who was like, I can't wait to graduate so I could stay at home. And I was like, oh, wow, that's interesting, because that was not the journey I would want to take as I'm about to graduate, right? And stuff, but it spoke loudly to me that maybe there's some support that was missing there for that physician. And so that's was really important as a nonverbal. But then I think also just asking about the interactions with the attendings is really important. Like what does that look like? Is it like a collaborative? Is there a hierarchy? Like what is the communication styles like, or the personality styles, and just the flow of the ED as well, too, can kind of give you an idea of the lay of the land. Even though you're not allowed to step in there because of the Zoom environment, you can kind of get an idea of what to expect if you're choosing that program and stepping in on day one as an intern.
I I very much relate to everything that's being said, and a lot of this is using your powers of observation rather than specific questions you ask. I think that's very true. But I think when I reflect back on my residency experience and where I found my satisfaction, it had so much to do with the peer bonding, and I have great faculty, great place, but it was my connection with my peers that defined my experience. And so I really would pay close attention to, like Dr. Sule was saying, if there are virtual group Zoom meets, we're limited there, but how residents interact with each other. Do they seem genuine? Do they seem happy to be together? I think you could ask them, can you tell me when you have time to talk to the residents, how do you guys spend time together, and see what things that they can say. So, and then, I think two things people are very tuned with that fit. One is geography, is like we said, and one is that perceived sense of happiness. And it would be unusual for you to kind of have a place say, we're miserable here. It's kind of like the worst feedback you typically get is you did a good job, right? That's the bottom line. But I think, again, using your powers of observation, you might be able to say, like, they say they're happy, but you can also perceive happiness by a certain laughter, lightness, a certain repertoire between different people. So I would just pay attention to the smiles, the energy that is limited but still there virtually, and how people just seem to connect with one another. I think that's very telling to how you might fit or belong to a place.
Something else that I'm not sure you'll necessarily get a straight answer on always is just trying to get at how places pick which residents are involved in these sessions and things like that as well. So some places will just open it up to everyone, others will have a select few, et cetera, as well. And there's a little bit of reading into that you can do potentially as well, because are they truly just putting their best face forward? Or are they giving you a really transparent look at who they are genuinely as well? So it's something to keep in the back of your mind. Don't want to read into it too much, but something to think about.
Another good segue actually into our next question, which is not about watching the residents per se, but focusing on the structure of the interview day itself. So both the structure of it, because that will vary a little bit between programs, but also in your interactions one-on-one with, say, faculty members, are there things that students can be looking for that are either great big green flags or red flags that might not be obvious unless you're paying attention to, that should tip them one way or the other?
I don't know if there's, well, I mean, there's like obvious red flags, but I don't think there's going to be many programs in the country who are going to put someone, who even have faculty who are like the terrible glaring red flags that maybe we've heard about in the past. But I think there might be your personal red flags. Like if someone's talking to you in a way that someone was saying before, like makes you feel defensive, or just kind of making you question yourself, or for whatever reason, you're like, I don't like how this is going. That's your red flag. That's fine. Maybe the next person loves that interviewer. Everyone can have different opinions. I really think paying attention to your gut and following your gut on kind of the gist of at the end of your interview and saying, I like that. I could go to a shift with these people. I could go out for a beer with these people, like something like that is really important at the end of the day for deciding what's your personal red flags and what makes you excited to potentially be a resident there.
I think in terms of red flags, it's really, really hard to do. But what I would keep an eye out for is a level of organization as well. So if it seems like the interview day is completely disorganized, not on time, whether it's program coordinator, program director, whoever it might be, it's kind of running the show there seems out of place, give yourself a little bit of pause, because that's something that is going to reflect on the program as well. Now, the caveat to that is the first week or two of interviews of every season are always going to be a little bit hit or miss as everyone's getting back into the grind of it. So I think that you can give most of us a free pass on that. But after that, at least, I do think there's something to be said for organization as well.
And also, as you're thinking about like your EM journey and like what you want to do after residency, even though you're like, I'm just trying to get into residency, please, it is good to think just a little bit ahead of the next step after you graduate, because the 3 to 4 years will go by very quickly, surprisingly. Is really looking at the faculty and the patient population and kind of the opportunities there to see if it's going to help you on your next step for it. So for example, if you're interested in ultrasound and you want to do a fellowship, maybe looking at a place that might have an ultrasound fellowship would be good, or at least they have a lot of faculty that are excited about ultrasound is great, right? So that you can actually learn your skills as you're going through, but kind of thinking about what is it that you want in your education as well. If you really like penetrating trauma, but the hospital only sees 80% blunt trauma, right? Maybe that's not the right place for you to train. So little things like that can also help you to kind of decide, 3 years versus 4 years. There's a lot of different considerations there of what you're looking for, because that can also help you later on as you're making your rank list, which I think we'll go through a little bit later, but kind of helping you to figure out, which program is the right kind of fit for you based on those values and things that you're looking for in a program.
Now, since you guys are all program leadership, one question that I had that I think will be insightful for a lot of our students is what questions, and I know a lot of it is the little things you can observe that are nonverbal, but specifically what questions do you think that students should be asking you specifically as program leadership that are going to help them determine fit that they can't necessarily get from talking to residents or even other faculty members?
I think there are two questions that I appreciate being asked, or I mean, I'm open to any question, but I do always find it interesting when someone asks me, tell me what you look for in a resident, or what do you value, like, or residency, and it gives me a chance to kind of share my values or what I think really is makes for a successful and a stellar resident. It's probably similar to what anyone would say, but it at least creates a space to see if we have shared values of how we see this profession. And then I also appreciate being asked, what do you enjoy being, what do you love about where you are? What's kept you where you are? And that may open up a little sense of how people find joy at their place of work, and whether that's a shared joy, and that's also something you could relate to and connect with if you were to be at that program.
I also think a good question to ask is if there's any perceived changes or anything that might be coming down the line that isn't necessarily like advertised on the website or something. If there's going to be, program leadership change potentially, or is there a major curriculum revamp, something like that. Just asking, is there anything coming up in the next 3 to 4 years, that is a change that might impact you, right? Because then if, they're changing something significant about the curriculum or what have you, and then maybe that was something that you thought was super awesome, and then it might not be there anymore. It's just something to consider. Usually places will be open and honest about that. And the answer might be that, there might be a change, there might not be a change, but just appreciating the, fluidity of education as it is, and things like that. And then the other question that I think kind of similar along the same lines, asking like what type of person or what style learner does well in your institution, because different places have different styles of teaching, and that might differ with 3 to 4 year program or just different faculty. I remember on my interview trail, I was sitting down in like one of the morning of pre-interview lecture, and someone from the program came out and was just like very like, you're not going to be spoon fed, you're going to do this, and it was like very like militant, and I was kind of like, oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. But if that doesn't work for you, then that's a red flag. But this person just kind of laid it all out there, like, this is what I expect from all of my residents up front. So I really think having a good sense of that and asking that question outright might, make or break a program for you. And this is all about how you find the best fit for you.
Something else to toss out there is, because as program leadership, I think we're able to present ourselves reasonably well in these interviews as well. But I think it's nice if you have an interview with a resident to perhaps not put them on the spot, but just kind of ask them a question such as, what's something that's changed with the program in the last year that you're not a fan of, that was controversial for the residents, or something like that as well, because it'll give you a sense for the types of changes. And the other one, which I was asked, I don't know if it was last week or the week before we just started interviews, maybe it was last season, and forgetting, was one of the candidates asked me at the end of it, what have we not talked about that you would really like to talk about right now? And they asked me that question, which I thought was a great way to for me to come up quickly about what do I prioritize in this program without having to think about the prepped version of what we might have as well. So it was good to be put on the spot a little bit there.
I really, I really liked, just going back to what Dr. Nordberg said about learning styles, if I wanted to tease it out a little bit more, because I think that really is another important part of the fit equation. And it's really not about right or wrong. It really is what works for you. And so just expanding upon that, just the idea that one thing you may want to be aware of, and honestly, I know my program. I don't know other people's programs well. But I do remember a sense that in some places, learning may be a little bit more through your own experience and trials and tribulations, where in other places there may be a little bit of a tighter degree of supervision. And so some people may like to learn a little bit, like, I want my freedom and have my space, and other people like, I really want tight supervision. I'm more comfortable in that. So I don't have a great sense of that, and I could be honestly a little bit off base, but I do get a sense of the levels of supervision, how pods or sections of the ED are staffed might vary a little bit, and you might talk to residents about that degree of supervision and how they feel about that, and whether, depending on yourself, whether that would work for you.
Also like the mentorship, right? Because I think so much of medicine and kind of growing your careers and your, even just for wellness as well too, right? It's mentorship and having someone who's on your side kind of coaching you through this journey of residency, where you're going to be learning, and sometimes the learning curve feels very steep. It's nice to have someone on your side. So I love questions about like mentorship, what's in place, kind of how that's actually established and maintained for the residents themselves too, because I think that's really important. And I know in my life I've seen how mentorship has really been key for growth and opportunities as well. So that's another question that I often hear our candidates asking, is about mentorship. And then wellness is the only other thing, not to be the wellness person on here, but asking about wellness and, scheduling and time off and vacation and all those things that you need to do to decompress after work is really important, just so that you can always show up to work ready to work, but also make sure you have time away to enjoy yourself and actually live your life in residency as well.
I think a question that often comes up towards the end of the season, but we'll bring it up here, is, if you've had X number of interviews and then it's months and months before you're really submitting your rank list, let alone finding out where you're going on match day. I think a lot of people struggle to really remember the salient features and to compare them in a very meaningful way when you just finished an interview for one program, but another one you may have loved was 2 months ago. So any tips on directly comparing programs, or even just remembering the things that you found most important so that you can make that call in the spring?
What I did, which was low tech, and now I probably easier to do high tech, is actually after every interview, I wrote the program on an index card. I wrote the program name, and then in the back, I wrote like gut feelings and maybe perceived pros, perceived cons. And then every interview, I actually put them in a running rank list, so to speak. And so I'd be like, oh, okay, like what was my gut? What was my gut? Now probably people do like Google Docs or something like that. But I think you're right. You don't want to just wait till the end. You want to have some sort of active iterative process where you're kind of making smaller decisions along the way, because if you otherwise don't remember anything about any of your programs and you haven't thought about it at all, and it's time to make a rank list, it's going to be relatively challenging to do so. Yeah, I would say, we're moving to a electronic interview season. May as well have a Google Doc, just jot down your thoughts after every interview, even maybe some concerns you might have. And then you could also reach out to, residents or others like later on in the season, if there was something in the back of your mind where you're like, oh, I heard this and I wanted to talk a little bit more about it. But you should definitely do something active and iterative to prevent yourself from being overwhelmed at the end.
I totally agree with this. I had the exact same method. I had like a little like cork board and in my apartment, and like kept a running list and would like move an index card around, whatever, as like I went. I was a bit like OCD about it, but I think it's the most important point there is that you should really be making your rank list as you go. You're probably going to know your top 3, which order exactly, might change a little bit here and there. You're probably going to know your bottom 3. It's like the jumble in the middle that, is going to be where you're like, I really can't remember. I don't know. What was this? That sort of thing. So even just like writing things, oh, this interviewer asked me this question, made me feel uncomfortable, putting that on a note card, making sure that you remember that sort of thing. But definitely make your rank list as you go. I think that's the most important thing. And then when you've made your rank list and you've made peace with your rank list, just leave it alone. You don't have to keep touching it. It's done. You did everything. And now you're just waiting for match day.
I think that peace of mind, like trusting yourself as well, is really key, because I think, all of our students still come to us and they're changing number like 4 through 8, right? Or like, and perseverating over it, right? Because your top 1, 2, and 3, right? So it gets really tricky, but in the end, that rank list, you won't remember it, 10 years later, but you spend so much time on it. So definitely just, yeah, if you're able, and I especially love the advice about, I had the pros and cons, and I wish on the back I had written about the feelings about it, because I think that really speaks louder than actually those pros and cons that you're saying, because at the end of the season, how it made you feel, the connection you made, things about the program you're excited about, and also the things you're concerned about, I think really will help you more. So, but mine was just a very, what I thought, subjective pros and cons. Was missing a little bit of some of that feeling at the end, and then ranking it as you go along. I could definitely agree with that. I think that'll make your life a whole lot easier, and trust yourself.
I totally agree with putting it away once you're done with it as well, because one of the things that's going to happen, as Ryan talked about technology, what's also changed is with the way we're interacting with each other. So you're going to see close to match lists due to a rank list due time and stuff. Social media, other online for are going to explode with everyone's impression of programs. And it's really important to take a step back from that, because a fit is not about what's on a shared Google Doc or spreadsheet that everyone in the country is adding little notes to. It's about your fit. And so to take that step back and look at your index card, look at your thoughts, and go with that gut feeling, as opposed to getting too swayed by what others may be saying or not. Because, most of us in program leadership will tell you, if not all of us, that wherever you train, you're going to be in good shape eventually. There are going to be aspects of it that fit you better, aspects that don't fit you well enough at some programs, but they're all good programs in general. And so you want to make sure that you're not getting too swayed by someone else's opinion of a program, but really going with your own view of it.
I love the old school recommendation of the note cards. For you guys should try it out if you haven't. I think there's a tactile feel, something about writing it out rather than typing it. So I wish I had done that. Yeah, I've seen the spectrum of how people make decisions. I know my residency, someone literally had a spreadsheet and like had a point system. And I don't know, that was a bit extreme for me. I was definitely on the other end of the spectrum where it was a gut-based decision, and it was really based on feeling. I didn't have a sophisticated note card system, but I really like the advice to like make sure you record your feelings. I really think that that's important, and recognizing that programs you interviewed in the beginning are not going to have that immediacy of feelings that you do in the end. So just trying to capture that. And I totally agree. My own experience and what I've seen in my students is usually a top 3 stand out. That was exactly the number I was going to say for that was mentioned, and that's probably what you'll wrestle with somewhere along that line.
I will also say, if you're like between 1 and 2 and you're having a really tough time, what I actually did, which sounds kind of odd, is I've actually flipped a coin. And it seems a little bit, weird to flip a coin for such a big life decision, but I did. But once the coin's in the air, you actually know how you're going to want it. You'll know if you're like happy or gut, if you're happy or you're disappointed with it. So I was actually between ranking Harbor #1, and I grew up in NorCal, and there's another very popular county program in Northern California. And so I flipped a coin, and it came up. Clearly, where I trained and where I'm faculty now. And it came up that way, and I felt good about it. And I would say it's fit. Like the point system, I think that's too much, right? It doesn't matter if you love a program, you love the location, you love the people, and like every Tuesday anesthesia gets to do the intubations or something like that. Like that doesn't matter, right? Like you got to like where you're at, the patients you're caring for, and the people you work with, and all those other like little things that you think might have like a little bit of importance to it are far outweighed by the importance of you being happy with your people, location, and patients. So,
Ryan, I have to ask, is that how you make all big decisions in life, or was that unique to this decision?
Oh, every decision.
Okay, your wife knows that.
Yeah, actually, I couples matched, so I had a second, rank list to work with, and so the aside on that one is probably just make your rank list independently, and then set aside an evening with your partner to see how they align and make some decisions based on that.
You are all reminding me of a technique I heard this time last year doing my own rank list thinking. I had read online somewhere, someone advocated for not writing out your gut feelings, but for recording it in audio, because the idea was you could hear how excited you were in retrospect listening back, whereas it wouldn't necessarily come through on ink. Now, I couldn't do that because I can't listen to myself on recording. It's just too much. But one thing I will say, just briefly from my own experience, is you get that same effect by talking to people you trust in your life, because they will remember how you feel. Because I can't tell you how many times I would sit down and say, oh, I loved this program, and talk to, say, my partner who says, no, you didn't like that program at all. Or the opposite, just because they remember how you felt right after it. So just a brief aside there. But, the next question we have on this is really in the post-interview season, or just after any one interview. If you feel like something's been left unsaid, or you just feel like you haven't quite captured the program in the way you wish you had during your opportunities with their structured interview and other sessions, how do you go about getting that information?
I would see if your program ideally that you interviewed at has some sort of mechanism for that. So what we do is about 3/4 of our residents actually are willing to give all our interviewees their cell phone numbers. So what we do is we actually send every interviewee a list of, like, we have 64 residents, like 50 of our residents' cell phone numbers, where they live, their interests. You just text anybody. Doesn't matter. You can just text one of the residents, that you for some reason identify with. Or share a background with, shoot them a text, ask them some questions. At the end of the day, your Zoom call is, there's conflicts of interest, right? We're program leadership, we're recruiting residents, right? So you really need to get like good information somewhere, right? And the social is a great way to do that, because, the residents are, going to be more likely to, tell you some of the things in the program that they wish maybe were a little bit different, especially if you have a connection with one of those residents or have alumni or something else. But definitely, ideally there's some mechanism where you can reach out to someone without those, conflicts of interest, so to speak. Because, an interview day, we are putting our, so to speak, like best foot forward, right? You didn't get a month to rotate at every single place you interviewed at, where you actually see how people interact. You see the pluses, you see the minuses, you eat the Harbor cafeteria food, which is the definite minus of our program. But you actually get, an unbiased kind of view of how things will be. So any way that you can get that information, whether it's a connection, a friend of a friend, or through some of the residents, is so valuable to really making an informed decision.
I'll just add one other source that Ryan's alluding to. Clerkship directors, program directors may know alumni that, where their graduates have gone. So you could always ask, have any of our students gone to this program? Now things change over time. Even if they're not there now, they may have a memory. So there may be alumni networks at your medical school, or maybe one of a peer did a way rotation there. Just some, as far as sources of information and networking, that may be another one there.
So another thing that I think has come up a couple times, and I personally think is just so important, and that is the concept that fit for you is not the same as fit for me. That you don't need to find a place that everybody in the country wants to go, because you are not everybody in the country. And so I think there are some things that are relatively straightforward that go into that. Where did I grow up? Where are my folks? Where does my partner want to be? Am I couples matching? Those things that are a little bit more straightforward, that are specific to you as an applicant, that are going to be important. I guess the other thing that I'm wondering what your input is those things that are not so clear cut. How should applicants go about deciding what is going to stand out and be most important? And I know it's a hard question to answer without knowing who we're talking about specifically, but things such as learning style or the level of autonomy, or whatever it is, what do you think students can do to figure out what that is for them?
So I know we talked about kind of index cards. I think it's a few weeks perhaps too late for this, but it can still be done, which is make an index card about yourself to start things off. So make an index card about your program. Everyone's looked at websites. You have an idea of what goes into a program, but you've not necessarily been to a lot of interviews so far. And so if you make a card about yourself, about what you prioritize in a sense at a gut level before going into it, before being swayed by interviews and personalities and everything else, at the end of the season, it would be nice to pull that out and say to yourself, this is what I was looking for. How does this really fit in with this as well? It's one way to kind of do that gut check, if you might.
Yeah, I'll definitely echo that. I think so often we're running on fast forward, right? That's our jobs in the ED, right? We don't have time to slow down, but it's actually giving yourself permission to actually invest in yourself and take a little time to know yourself and say, and think back on your learning experiences, right? Med school, the rotations you went through, which ones actually did you thrive in and do really great in? Which ones were really hard for you? Or what were the personalities of the supervisors or residents that you were around that made it challenging for those rotations, that you were counting down the hours till you're about to be done, right? Because that can actually help inform a little bit on what worked and didn't work for you, so that you can apply that later on into residency as well. So it really is giving yourself a little time to self-reflect. And then I love Dr. Sule's idea of putting that on an index card, because then you can match that up as a final gut check at the end, is like your number 1, 2, 3 programs. Do they match that same values that you were looking for? And if they don't, then take a little bit of time to pause and say, is that really then the right list for you, the ranking list for you, or should you actually take a step back and think about it? But yeah, giving yourself permission to know yourself a little bit better is going to be key to then making the right decision for yourself.
Yeah, I try not to plagiarize, but more just reframe in the way of what was said. That I just, even coming into this, before we started this discussion, I was thinking about the fit question really begins with a self-awareness and self-knowledge, and really, like Dr. Sule was saying. So I totally echo and relate to that. And then kind of what Dr. Natasan is saying is that you've already seen the ways within different specialties things can vary. The way people may teach differently, the way people may relate to differently. And so you can learn from that experience already that there's going to be some variation across programs in that same way. So yeah, I think taking a self-itinerary, a self-internal look, and just reflecting on the medical experience you've had so far, your own institution, and seeing what spoke to you, or what turned you off from something can be really revealing as far as going into your emergency medicine interviews.
The other thing I would say, I remember people in my med school class talking about like, oh, it's a great program in a terrible city or a terrible program in a great city and things like that. You know, not saying there's a terrible emergency medicine program. I don't think it exists, but you know, I think it's, if you're looking at it like that, like it's a great program, but I don't want to move to blank. Like that's not, you're less likely to thrive in that scenario, because if you're not at your best, if you're not well, if you're not happy, you're not going to learn as well. And so I don't think that it's worth it to force yourself to say like, oh, but this program, they do trauma this way and they see more, you know, their trauma numbers are this compared to this. And like you're comparing something that at the end of the day probably won't make a huge difference. What will make a huge difference is, are you going to be in a headspace where you are receptive to learning and receptive to feedback and be able to learn, you know, and still enjoy life in the 3 to 4 years where you have a whole lot of stuff going on. So I wouldn't ignore that feeling. Don't put aside your happiness. Like residency is tough, but you know, you still deserve to be happy during this time.
So we're approaching the top of the hour. So I did want to give one more opportunity before we have a final closing question for everybody, for all of our attendees. If there are any questions that you haven't asked that you'd like to, now would be a fantastic time. I'll give you a few minutes or a few seconds to think about it, and then I'll ask our final question.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, my name is Michael. I'm originally from Los Angeles, currently going to the University of Cincinnati for medical school. Thank you all for being here. My question is, I know some schools are offering in-person second looks and others are offering virtual only. If there's a program that I really like and they're only offering virtual second looks, I definitely want to be fair to all the other applicants. My question is it in poor taste to reach out either to like the resident recruiter or the program to see if there's some type of like way that they can meet up in person, or is that kind of like a no-go?
My personal feeling on this is if we do in-person second looks, then that's basically just transitioning some of like what was previously interview costs onto like second look costs. And I do worry that, you know, even with the best intentions that, you know, we will, you know, people would be prioritized essentially if they like have the ability to buy a plane ticket, get a hotel room and, you know, do a in-person second look. So I'm not sure if anyone on here is can speak to that if they're doing second looks, but we are not allowing any sort of program sanctioned in-person interactions with any applicant. Basically under any circumstances. If, you know, they happen to separately reach out to a resident outside of our program, like that's on them, but that's not something that we would ever like want to know about or hear about. It's just to help the applicant make a decision. But yeah, maybe somebody on this call is planning on doing any sort of in-person thing and can speak to that, but we made a decision not to for that reason.
I would just, in terms of like your question about like reaching out, I think this whole thing has been hashed out in many different forms, iterations over the past several years. And so if a program says like, we will have this option for a virtual second look, to me, that implies because we're not doing an in-person look. You know what I mean? Like that means they already like thought about it, went through it, decided on this, and they're offering a virtual second look. You know, if you're like really like I won't rest until I know if it could be an option, you know, then email the program coordinator and ask. But yeah, I think a lot of programs have put a lot of time and mental energy into this this question of in-person versus virtual second looks. It is rarely that they're saying virtual second look only because it's easier. You know, it's more often the underlying answer is that people want to keep it a level playing field and, you know, not introduce bias and that sort of thing. So don't think a program is like taking the easy way out, just doing a virtual second look or something like that. It's not at all what it is meant to be.
Yeah, Michael, it's a great question and one that's hard to answer because I don't think anyone knows for sure. And I think honestly, there's going to be some variation. I think the take-home message is you should ask, how are you handling second looks at your institution? And whatever it is, respect it. There's going to be a timing difference. I think most of what I'm sensing is people are going to be very intentional about if there is any second look opportunity, whether it's virtual or in person, it's going to be after rank list formation to kind of prevent the bias that was just discussed. But and there may be, you may get replies that say you're welcome to come to the city and see the hospital, but we can't have any direct contact with you. So I think you just have to ask and just be respectful of whatever that program has decided to they want to handle that.
I have a question if you guys have time. My name's Ashley. I'm an international medical student. I went to China Medical University and now in the States doing rotations. I would like to do emergency medicine and do wilderness medicine, international medicine, climate medicine, all of it. As a program director, a fellowship program that your program doesn't offer, but you know your student or resident is passionate about, is that an indicator that they wouldn't be a good fit in your mind? Or is that something that, you know, I think for like wilderness medicine, there's only a couple, undersea medicine, there's only a couple in the nation. Is that ever a red flag for a program director?
I don't think so. I think for some of these, especially as you pointed out, there's a very limited number of fellowships out there. And I think we very much realize that there's no way that those are going to be the only 2 or 3 programs that you wish to interview at, rank, whatever else as well. So I think there is a lot of flexibility there. That being said, I think during the interview process and stuff, there is something to be said for just being able to understand a candidate in terms of what their other interests are. Because as you said yourself, it's not just wilderness medicine or just international that you're interested in. There's a variety of things. And so something in that does need to fit eventually. It can't be 8 things that you're interested in and they're completely opposite of what a program has to offer. So there's got to be some overlap there, but by no means does it need to be a one-to-one overlap, would be my sense at least.
The other thing I would ask in that situation, if I was the applicant asking the program, is, you know, what can residents do with their elective time? Can you make your own elective? Can you, you know, explore your interests in that way if there is no kind of built-in exposure to your interest?
Yeah, I think that's super important. Asking like how they have mentored people with similar interests in the past. Like, you know, we don't have, like last year, one of our residents went to UC San Diego for undersea like hyperbarics fellowship. We don't have one. But we are really close to Catalina Island and we're able to set up, you know, like hyperbarics electives during elective time. And so, you know, there are some times that, you know, you may not have a specific fellowship in it, but you might have enough background and resources to successfully mentor someone into being competitive for a career in that facet, even if it's not there. But it's something you should ask about, because then you don't necessarily have like an ingrained, pre-established expertise and pathway in that specific thing, depending on how, you know, kind of niche it is. So.
Yeah, actually, great question. 2 sides to it. One is what you're just being told about, not to be afraid of hiding your interest or exploring how it might be supported. And then also your concern, like if you happen to ultimately love a program, and I'm just worried you just hurt your chances because the program that doesn't have wilderness medicine, you can always, through different mechanisms, just reinforce that, what you love about the place. Kind of what Dr. Slay was saying, it's part of the equation, but just present yourself honestly and what you're generally interested in. And if you feel like you just need to reinforce that that's not your deciding factor in all the things you like, I don't think you'll be hurt by exploring that in your interview and just making it known that how you feel in the end.
I think that's actually a really good point. And also that you're honest with yourself that is the truth, right? Because this is about fit, right? So, if you come to our program and you're really interested in doing physical, like global emergency medicine during residency, our residents are paid by the taxpayers of the County of Los Angeles, and the County of Los Angeles Board of Supervisors is like, we don't want people providing service globally when we have, our underserved population right here. And so honestly, the County of Los Angeles is not supportive of that activity. And so if it's true, like you're willing to put those global interests on hold during residency and focus on your training, that's fine. But if it's super important to you, then you really need a program that can fund that and give you that experience, because it is a fit thing, right? If you're not going to be happy there, if you can't pursue your passion, that's something that you should take into consideration.
All right, since we've just got about 3 minutes left, I'd love if we could just do one, parting word of wisdom from each panelist as we end the session. And thank you all very much. Just right now, all our panelists who have generously spent their time with us this evening. Thank you to all the applicants that came and asked such insightful questions. With that, let's go around one last time.
Kick us off then, I guess, because I did the first intro. So, but I think parting words is just really to get to know yourself and what you're looking for in a program and your values, and then also be confident in yourself, right? You have a lot of talent and skills and passion that we're excited to kind of welcome into our field as colleagues someday. So the journey is long and hard, and just know that we're all kind of rooting for you and believing you, and are excited to get to know you on this path or later on as colleagues someday.
I think I'd put out there, prepare to be surprised a little bit, in that I think you go into this process with some preconceived notions about programs and what they have to offer, but you'll be surprised by a lot of places. So going in with an open mind really is critical to this process, and then being honest with yourself at the end of it, going with that gut feeling at a certain level too.
Yeah, I ended up where I trained and where I worked, totally surprised. Both worked out, but they were not where I thought I was going to end up. So totally echo that. I think my take home points are what was echoed about the importance of geography and the big picture of not just your own, but other people's happiness that you're bringing along this wonderful but intense journey. And just kind of recognizing residency is, for me, so much more about the relational than the curriculum and some of the numbers and things like that. It's really about your connection with people. And that's how I would approach this process, is, do I feel connected with the people of a program? I would emphasize that.
Yeah, I think I would say I always tell our students, that the whole thing, what I said before, like if you're in a place where you're just not set up for success personally, like, you won't do well, certain part of the country, whatever, like you need to be close to family. It doesn't matter if that's, there are a lot of rank lists and stuff going around now, like, oh, this program is the best, you know what I mean? Like, it's the best for what person, like it has to be the best for you. So I would, I'm not saying don't talk to other people about their experiences on the interview trail, but I think take it with a grain of salt. This is your future. You have to be happy where you are in order to learn to be able to become a great emergency medicine physician.
Geography, go with your gut. You'll do great.
All right, that about wraps it up. Thank you, everyone. Special thanks to Holly. We appreciate you and for setting this up. And have a good night, everybody.